Welcome back to the deep dive. We are doing something a little different today. Usually we look at things out there, history, technology, economics. But today we're kind of turning the lens inward.
Way inward.
Yeah, we are tackling a figure who is, I think it's fair to say, one of the most important, but maybe also the most intimidating thinkers of the 20th century. We are talking about Edmund Husserl.
Intimidating is definitely the word. I mean, if you walk into a philosophy library and you pull a book like Logical Investigations or, God forbid, Ideas Pertaining to a Pure Phenomenology off the shelf,
Right.
your first instinct is probably to just slide it right back in. The language is so dense, the sentences go on for like a full page, and the concepts feel incredibly abstract.
I've heard his work described as mathematics for the soul, which, frankly, sounds like a complete nightmare for anyone who struggled with algebra.
It really can feel that way.
Uh-huh.
But the irony, and this is, I think, what we really need to land on today, is that Husserl's entire mission, the whole reason he wrote thousands of these impossible-to-read pages, was to get us back to simplicity.
Simplicity, that feels counterintuitive.
It does, but his goal was to strip away all the complex theories, all the scientific baggage, and just to look at the world as it actually appears to us.
I've also seen him described not just as a philosopher, but as a radical scientist of the mind.
That is the perfect description. And radical is the key word there. He wasn't just trying to, tweak psychology or something. He was trying to rebuild all of human knowledge from the ground up.
Because when we think of science, we usually think of test tubes, telescopes, measuring things, external things.
Objectivity.
Right, objectivity. But Husserl seemed obsessed with a totally different problem, a problem that sounds really simple, but is actually kind of terrifying when you stop and think about it for a second. How do we know anything is actually real?
Exactly. I mean, think about the time he was living in. This is a late 19th, early 20th century. You've got this massive explosion of scientific objectivity. Physics, chemistry, biology. They were mapping the physical world with this incredible new precision. But Husserl looked at all this progress, and he asked a very, very uncomfortable question. Where is the human being in all of this?
Right. Like you can measure the wavelength of light until you're blue in the face, but that doesn't explain my actual experience of seeing the color red.
Precisely. How do we account for the subjective experience of the scientist who was doing the measuring in the first place? If you strip away the conscious mind that's having the experience, does the objective world even make sense anymore?
So he's saying we're building this giant skyscraper of science on a foundation that we don't understand at all, which is our own conscious life.
That's it. It's the classic if a tree falls in the forest question, but on steroids.
On steroids, and with rigorous mathematical logic applied to it.
You got it. And that is what we're going to unpack today. We've got a massive stack of sources here, extensive biographical records, his major works like Logical Investigations, Ideas, and his later stuff like The Crisis of European Sciences, plus accounts of his very dramatic and frankly tragic personal life.
And we're going to get into how he went from being a mathematician to a philosopher, how he founded this whole school of thought called phenomenology, and yeah, the incredibly high personal stakes of his later years.
We have to. The drama is a huge part of the story. The rise of the Nazis, his betrayal by his star student, Martin Heidegger. It's not just abstract theory. It's a tragedy.
A Shakespearean tragedy, it sounds like.
It really is.
But let's start at the beginning. You mentioned he started in math. And I think that's surprising for a guy known for studying feelings or consciousness. You expect a poet, not a calculator.
Well, it is absolutely essential to understanding it. If you don't get the math part, you don't really get Husserl. So Edmund Husserl was born in 1859 in Prusnitz, Moravia, which was part of the Austrian Empire back then.
Okay.
He was born into a Jewish family. He was the second of 4 kids, and his father was a milliner.
A hat maker.
A hat maker, yeah. Or practical trade. And I think that's interesting because Husserl wasn't, born into the high aristocracy of German academia. He came from a background of making things, of practical, solid reality. But his mind
was somewhere else entirely.
It was in the stars. His early academic path was strictly hard sciences. He went to the University of Leipzig, then Berlin, studying mathematics, physics, and astronomy.
So he wasn't sitting around in cafes discussing the meaning of life. He was crunching numbers.
He was crunching numbers at the highest possible level. I mean, look at who his mentor was. Carl Weierstrass.
I remember that name from the briefing. For those of us who haven't touched a calculus textbook in, let's say, a decade or two, remind us who Weierstrass is.
He is essentially the father of modern analysis. Before Weierstrass, calculus was a bit loosey-goosey. People played fast and loose with concepts like infinitesimals. Weierstrass was the guy who came in and brought absolute, ironclad, rigorous logic to calculus. He was all about precision, definition, removing any ambiguity whatsoever.
So Husserl is trained in this environment where there is a right answer, a wrong answer, and a logical proof for everything. There's no room for, well, that's just, your opinion, man.
None. Zero. He is a logic nerd through and through. He gets his PhD in mathematics in 1883. But here's the pivot. While he's in Leipzig, he starts wandering into some philosophy lectures just for fun. And then later in Vienna, he attends lectures by a man named Franz Brentano.
Brentano. Okay, this is a name that keeps popping up in the history of psychology and philosophy.
He was a force of nature. Brentano was this former Catholic priest who had left the church because he couldn't accept the doctrine of papal infallibility.
Wow.
So he was intense, he was charismatic, and he was teaching this new idea of descriptive psychology. He believed you could study the mind with scientific rigor.
So you've got Weierstrass on one shoulder, the cold, rigid logician, and then you have Brentano on the other, the fiery, passionate psychologist.
And poor Husserl is stuck right in the middle. Brentano is the one who plants the seed in his mind. What if we could be just as rigorous about consciousness as we are about math? What if we could find the fundamental laws of the mind?
And that attempt to bridge that gap, that leads to his first big failure, right? Or at least his first big rethink, his book, The Philosophy of Arithmetic.
Yes, published in 1891. This was his first major attempt to square that circle. And frankly, looking back, it was a bit of a disaster. He tried to explain mathematics psychologically. He wanted to figure out, how does the mind actually count?
Okay, let's unpack this, because to me, counting just seems like something we do. I see 3 apples on the table, I say 3. Why is that a deep philosophical problem?
Because Husserl was fascinated by the mechanism of it. He made this distinction between what he called proper and improper presentation.
Proper and improper. It sounds like table manners. Don't use the improper fork for your salad.
Not quite. Think of it more in terms of direct versus indirect. Let's say you're standing in front of a house or looking right at it with your own eyes. You have a proper presentation of the house. It's there, physically present to your senses. You're experiencing houseness directly.
Okay, got it. Direct experience.
But now, let's say you're looking for a friend's house, and all you have is the address written on a piece of paper, 123 Maple Street. You are thinking about the house. You're trying to find the house. But the house itself isn't present to you. You're using a symbol, signs, words, numbers, to point to something that isn't here. That is an improper presentation.
I see. So the address is like a pointer. It's not the thing itself.
It's just a pointer. And Husserl realized that most of mathematics is improper in this sense. When we talk about the number 1,000 or 1 billion, we aren't actually visualizing 1 billion individual dots in our heads.
No, of course not. Our brains can't hold that.
Right. We're using a symbol. We're manipulating signs that stand in for that quantity. And Husserl tried to read all of this in psychology, in how the brain groups things together and performs these mental acts to create these concepts.
So he publishes this book. He's feeling pretty good about it. He thinks he's solved the puzzle of math by explaining it through brain processes. And then the sledgehammer drops.
The sledgehammer named Gottlob Frege.
I love that name, Gottlob Frege.
It sounds like a villain in a silent movie or something.
To Husserl at the time, he probably felt like one. Frege was this brilliant logician who wrote a review of Husserl's book. And it wasn't just a bad review. I mean, it was a complete demolition.
Ouch.
Frege essentially said, Edmund, you are a very smart man, but you have made a catastrophic error.
And what was that error?
Psychologism. That's the technical term for it. Frege argued that if mathematics is just psychology, if it's just how the human brain happens to count, then math becomes subjective. It becomes relative. Wait, I want to make sure I get this. Because my brain works pretty much like your brain. So wouldn't our math be the same? It still feels objective to me.
Maybe. But what if we encountered an alien species and their brains were, I don't know, silicon-based and wired completely differently? Would 2 plus 2 still equal 4 for them?
Wow. Yes, of course it would. 2 plus 2 is 4. It doesn't matter who or what is doing the counting.
Exactly. That was Frege's entire point.
Yeah.
But if Husserl was right, and math is just a biological process of the human brain, then math is contingent on our specific biology. If the human species died out, the number 4 would cease to exist. Frege said. No, The number 5 is an objective fact. It is an eternal truth. It isn't a brain state any more than the planet Jupiter is a brain state.
That is a heavy, heavy hit. Because if Husserl is right, then truth itself is just a matter of opinion or, biology.
And that leads directly to skepticism. If truth is just how we happen to think, then there is no absolute truth. There's just my truth and your truth and the alien's truth. And Husserl, at his core, was a man who believed in absolute truth. He took this criticism incredibly seriously.
So this is the crisis point. Most people, I think, would probably double down and defend their books. They'd write an angry letter back saying, "You just don't get it, Frege." But Husserl didn't do that.
No. And that is the mark of his profound intellectual honesty. He went silent. He barely published anything for nearly a decade. He went back to the drawing board entirely. He realized he had made a huge mistake. He needed a way to save the objectivity of logic, but without just ignoring the mind that perceives it.
Yeah, to thread an impossible needle.
He had to invent a completely new way of seeing. And this leads to his great breakthrough work around 1900, the logical investigations. He completely reverses his position. He starts arguing that logical laws are ideal, they're objective, they exist independently of the human mind, almost like Platonic forms.
But wait, if they exist outside the mind, then how do we access them? Isn't he just back to being a pure mathematician again, ignoring the mind?
That's the brilliance of his pivot. He decides that we need a new way to study the mind itself, not as a biological organ that creates fuzzy subjective logic, but as the instrument that is capable of grasping these ideal objective truths.
Oh, he changes the question.
He completely changes the question. He stops asking, how does the brain create logic? And he starts asking, how does consciousness experience logic? And this, my friend, is the birth of phenomenology.
Okay, cue the dramatic music. This is the big moment. He invents a science of essences.
Of Wissenschaft.
I am definitely not going to try to pronounce that, but let's get into the how, because this is where Husserl goes from being a math nerd to a radical scientist. He says we have to start by moving beyond something he calls the natural attitude.
Yes, the natural attitude.
I love this term. It sounds like something a teenager has. You better lose that attitude. But what did Husserl mean by it?
The natural attitude is our default mode of existence. It's how you and I and everyone listening goes through 99.9% of our day. We just assume the world is out there. This microphone is real, the table is real, the traffic outside is real.
We take it for granted.
Completely.
Right.
We assume we are just biological entities moving through a pre-existing physical space. We assume that our perception just passively mirrors reality. We don't question how the world is appearing to us, we just accept that it is.
It's being on autopilot. It's like being in the Matrix before you take the red pill. You just accept the simulation as reality because you don't know anything else.
That's a great analogy. Husserl says that for the practical business of living our lives, the natural attitude is fine. You need it to drive a car or make a sandwich. But for a philosopher, or for anyone who wants to find real foundational truth, it's fatal.
Because it takes everything for granted.
Exactly. If we want to really know what's true, we have to suspend that attitude. We have to stop just assuming the world exists out there and turn our gaze inward to look at the experience itself.
And this brings us to the famous toolkit. If we're going to do this phenomenology, what are the tools we need? The first big one is something he got from Brentano, right? Intentionality.
Yes, intentionality. This is the absolute core, the bedrock of all of phenomenology. And we have to be really careful here because in everyday English, intentionality means doing something on purpose.
Right. I intended to go to the gym, but then I ate a whole pizza instead. I had good intentions.
Exactly. In phenomenology, intentionality has nothing to do with purpose or willpower. It means aboutness. It comes from the Latin word intender, which means to aim at or to stretch toward.
Okay.
Husserl and Brentano before him realized that the single defining feature of consciousness is that it is always of something or about something.
Can you give us a concrete example of that?
Sure. Try right now to just believe. Don't believe in something, just believe.
I can't. My brain immediately asks, believe what? I have to believe that it's raining or believe that you're right about this.
Exactly. Or try to fear. You can't just have generic, objectless fear floating in your head. You fear a spider, or you fear failure, or you fear the dark. Consciousness is like a directional arrow. It is always shooting out from you towards an object. You cannot have a thought without an object of thought.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. My mind isn't just an empty bucket. It's always actively grabbing onto something or pointing at something.
And this changes everything, because it means You can't study the mind in a vacuum, in isolation, like the psychologists wanted to, and you can't study the world in a vacuum, in isolation, like the physicists wanted to. You can only study the connection, the intentional arc that links the two.
So if intentionality is the arrow, what is the epoché? This is another one of those big Husserl terms, bracketing.
The epoché is the specific method we use to break out of the natural attitude. It comes from an ancient Greek skeptic term meaning suspension of judgment.
So we just stop judging things.
We stop judging reality. When we perform the epoché, or when we bracket the world, we don't deny that the world exists. We aren't saying, oh, nothing is real, it's all an illusion. That's not it at all.
Okay, so what are we doing?
We are just setting the question of its reality aside. We are putting it in brackets, just like in a math equation where you deal with the stuff in the brackets first. We're temporarily ignoring the question of whether it's really there.
Walk me through this. Let's say I'm looking at this coffee cup on the desk right now. How do I bracket it?
Okay. In the natural attitude, you look at it and you think, that is a ceramic cup filled with coffee. You assume it has mass, it's made of atoms, and that it will fall and smash if I push it off the desk.
Right. Standard cup stuff.
Now, bracket it. Suspend your belief that the cup is a physical object made of atoms. Suspend your knowledge of ceramics or gravity or the coffee trade. Just focus strictly, and I mean strictly, on how it appears to you in your consciousness right this very second.
Okay. I see a curved white shape. I see a dark brown circle inside it. I see a grip of light from the overhead lamp reflecting on the room. I can smell something roasted.
Good. Now, can you see the back of the cup?
No.
But you assume it's there. You assume it has a back.
Yes, of course.
In the epoché, you don't just assume it. You notice that you are assuming it. You realize, my consciousness is presenting this object to me as a complete three-dimensional whole, even though I am only ever seeing one two-dimensional side of it at a time.
So I'm watching my own mind construct the object.
You're watching the construction process.
Yeah.
You aren't studying the cup anymore. You are studying your experience of the cup.
So it's about becoming hyper-aware of the experience itself rather than the object that's supposedly causing the experience. It feels a little like meditation or mindfulness.
It is very, very similar to mindfulness. It's a fundamental shift from the what to the how. And once you learn to do that, Husserl says, you can perform the phenomenological reduction. You can start moving from the specific messy fact to the general pure essence.
And he had a very specific way of getting to that essence, right? A kind of mental workout he called eidetic variation.
This is a fascinating exercise. And it's his answer to the question of how we can know things for sure without running a scientific experiment. Let's try it. The classic example is always a triangle, which is a bit easy, but let's start there. So imagine a triangle.
Okay, I'm picturing a triangle in my head. It's an isosceles triangle, since you asked.
Perfect. Now, in your mind, I want you to start varying its features. This is the variation part. Make one of its sides much longer. Is it still a triangle?
Yes, just a weirder looking one.
Change its color to bright blue.
Yeah.
Is it still a triangle?
Yes.
Imagine it's made of wood instead of just being a line drawing. Still a triangle.
Yep.
Okay. Now add a fourth side to it.
No, now it's a square or a rectangle or some kind of quadrilateral. It is definitely not a triangle anymore.
Exactly. Through this eidetic variation, just by playing with the features in your imagination, you have discovered the essence, the eidos, of a triangle. You found the invariant feature, the thing that cannot be changed without destroying the object, which is having three straight sides that connect. You stripped away all the non-essentials like color, material, size, and you found the core truth.
Okay, that works for geometry. But Husserl wanted to do this with everything, right? With perception, with justice, with love.
Yeah.
That seems a whole lot harder.
It is much, much harder. But the method is the same. Let's try it with something more complex. Let's try it with the concept of a promise. What is the essence of making a promise?
Okay. A promise is when I say I'll do something in the future.
Okay, let's vary it. Imagine you say, I promise I will fly to the moon tomorrow using only my arms. But you know you can't possibly do it. Is that a genuine promise?
No, that's either a lie or a joke. So sincerity or maybe capability has to be part of it.
Good. Now imagine you say to someone, I promise I'm going to rob that bank for you. Is that a valid promise in the same way?
We'd probably call that a threat or a conspiracy, not a promise. A promise feels like it should be about something good, or at least neutral.
Ah. So maybe a promise implies some kind of benefit to the person being promised, or at least that it's not a malevolent act.
Maybe. Or at least it has to be part of a shared moral framework.
Okay, one more. Imagine You make a promise to yourself, just in your head, but you never tell another soul. I promise myself I'll start my diet tomorrow. Is that a promise in the full sense of the word?
It feels less binding. It's more like a resolution. A real promise seems to involve another person.
See what we are doing here? We're crashing the concept against all these different imaginary scenarios to see where it breaks, to see what its essential components are. Husserl believed that if we did this rigorously enough for everything, we could map out a kind of periodic table of human consciousness. We could understand the fundamental essence of law, of religion, of art, of everything.
That is unbelievably ambitious. He wanted to create a complete map of the geography of the mind.
That's a great way to put it. And to do that, to make his map more precise, he introduced two more key technical terms, noesis and noema.
These sound like the names of Greek gods or something.
They're Greek terms. Noesis, from the word nous for mind, is the act of thinking so, the perceiving, the judging, the remembering, the fearing. It's the inking part. Noema is the object of thought, the thing that is being perceived or remembered or judged.
Well, wait a minute. Didn't we just say that we've bracketed the object?
Yeah.
We don't care if it's really there.
This is the crucial distinction, and it's a little tricky. The noema is not the physical object out there in the world of atoms and molecules. It is the object as it is perceived by the mind.
Okay.
So if I remember a favorite toy from my childhood, the physical toy might be long gone. It could be in a landfill somewhere, totally disintegrated, it doesn't exist anymore. But the noema, the toy as remembered, with all its specific colors and the feelings and meanings attached to it, exists perfectly in my consciousness right now. The noema is the meaning object.
So the noema is like the internal avatar of the object, the file for it in my head.
That is a very good way to put it. It holds the sense of the object. And it includes all the different modes, like possible or doubtful or existent. If I see a vague figure in the fog, the noesis is my act of straining to see. The noema might be a possibly scary person. Then I get closer and I realize, oh, it's just a tree. The physical atoms of the tree didn't change, but the noema in my mind shifted dramatically from person to tree.
This is getting really deep. So he's building this massive, intricate, almost architectural structure of how the mind builds up reality from experience. But then around 1913, in his book Ideas, he takes a turn that apparently freaks some of his own students out, the transcendental turn.
Yes, in Ideas I, as it's known, Husserl goes full-on transcendental idealism. He starts to argue that the world is actually constituted by consciousness.
Okay, that sounds trippy. Constituted. What does that mean? Like, we literally create the world with our minds. Is this like the secret, manifest your reality?
Hey, no, it's not magic. He's not saying you can just close your eyes and wish for a Ferrari to appear in your driveway. But he did argue that the only way the world has any meaning, any structure, any objectivity at all is through the structuring activity of what he called the transcendental ego.
The transcendental ego.
This isn't Edmund Husserl, the guy with the big beard. And it's not host, speaker, the podcaster. This is the pure, absolute, anonymous self that is the ultimate observer of the world. It's the I that is doing the looking, the center point of all experience.
And this is where it gets super controversial, because if the world depends on my I to exist, that sounds dangerously close to
solipsism. His students, people like Roman and Garden, started getting very, very nervous. They thought, wait a minute, is he saying only the mind exists? That the physical world is just a dream? Is he becoming a solipsist?
Solipsism, the ultimate philosophical trap. The idea that I am the only conscious being that truly exists and everyone and everything else is just a figment of my imagination.
It's the black hole of philosophy. Because if I perform the epoché and I bracket the entire world and I focus only on my consciousness, how do I ever prove that you exist? I can see your body. I can hear your voice. But those are just phenomena happening in my visual field and my auditory field. How do I know there's actually a light on inside your head?
That seems like a pretty gigantic problem for a guy who's trying to explain all of reality. If he can't even prove that other people exist, his whole system fails.
It was a huge problem.
Yeah.
And Husserl spent a lot of his later career wrestling with it, particularly in a series of lectures called the Cartesian Meditations. He tries to solve the problem of other minds.
So how does he do it? How does he prove that I'm not just a sophisticated robot in his dream?
He starts from within what he calls the sphere of oneness. That's my private, reduced, first-person experience. He says, okay, within my field of vision, I perceive various bodies. I perceive my own body, my hands, my legs, which I experience from the inside. And I also see your body over there.
Okay.
But I perceive your body differently than I perceive a mannequin or a stone.
Because I move. Because I talk.
Because of a process he calls pairing or analogy. I see you acting in ways that are analogous to how I act. I see your body responding to stimuli in a coherent, meaningful way. If I prick you, you pull your hand back and say, ouch, just like I would. I see you smile. I see you frown. I see you as the center of your own world.
So I basically project my own experience of being an ego onto you.
Exactly. I recognize you as an alter ego, another I. It's
Right.
a kind of empathy, but it's a structural, perceptual empathy. It's not just a feeling. It's a fundamental way I constitute the world.
So he says we recognize the other.
We recognize the other, and this is the absolute key to solving the problem. Once I recognize that you are another subject, another point of view on the world, I realize that the world isn't just my world. It is our
A
world.
shared reality.
Precisely. This is what he calls intersubjectivity. The coffee cup is real and objective, not because its atoms exist in some void, but because I know that if you were to walk over here and look at it from your angle, you would see it too, just from a different perspective. We triangulate reality between our different consciousnesses. Objectivity, for Husserl, is actually just shared subjectivity.
That's actually a really beautiful idea. Reality is the thing that we all agree on because we experience it together.
It is. But as beautiful and intricate as these ideas were, the real, objective, historical world was about to crash in on Husserl in the most devastating way possible. And to understand that, we have to talk about the shadow of history.
Yes. We absolutely cannot talk about Husserl without talking about the rise of the Nazis, and specifically his relationship with Martin Heidegger. This part of the story feels like a movie plot. The master and the apprentice.
It really is. And to understand the pain of what happened, you have to understand the depth of the initial relationship. Martin Heidegger wasn't just another student. He was the prince. Husserl called him his phenomenological child. He was the chosen one.
I read that Husserl didn't have a great relationship with his own biological sons. Is that right?
He was complicated, yes. But Heidegger was the heir apparent. He was Husserl's personal assistant from 1920 to 1923. Husserl absolutely adored him. When Husserl retired from his chair at the University of Freiburg, he thought to make sure that Heidegger was the one who succeeded him. He thought, I have built the foundation, and Martin will be the one to build the skyscraper.
And Heidegger seemed to reciprocate that, at least at first.
Initially, yes. When Heidegger published his own philosophical masterpiece, Being and Time, in 1927, he dedicated it to Husserl in grateful respect and friendship. It was a huge public acknowledgement.
So what went wrong? Where did it all fall apart?
Well, first, the philosophy went wrong. And this is important. As Husserl read Being and Time more closely, he started to realize that Heidegger wasn't actually doing phenomenology the way Husserl intended it.
How so?
Husserl was interested in pure consciousness, the transcendental ego, the abstract, timeless structures of the mind. But Heidegger, he was interested in Dasein, which means roughly being there. He was interested in the concrete, messy, anxious experience of being a human being thrown into the world facing death.
So Heidegger made it gritty. He took the clean, sterile laboratory of phenomenology and dragged it out into the mud of real life.
He did. And Husserl saw this as a profound intellectual betrayal. He thought Heidegger was slipping back into what he called anthropology, just studying humans as a particular species of animal rather than studying the pure essence of mind itself. For Husserl, it felt like a return to the very psychologism he had fought so hard to escape.
But that intellectual betrayal was, in the end, nothing compared to the political one.
Nothing. 1933. Hitler comes to power. Now, we have to remember, Husserl was born into a Jewish family. He had converted to Lutheranism way back in 1886, and he considered himself a fiercely loyal German patriot. He was politically conservative. He loved Germany. His son, Wolfgang, had been killed in World War I fighting for Germany. Another son, Gerhard, had been badly wounded.
So he had paid the ultimate price for his country. He had given his country a son.
He had. But to the Nazis, none of that mattered. He was just a Jew. In April 1933, the new racial laws began to bite. And this is where the story gets just heartbreaking. Husserl is living in Freiburg, this quiet university town he had helped make world famous. And suddenly, overnight, he's a pariah.
There's a famous story about him being banned from the university library. We need to be careful with this because there are a lot of rumors and there are facts. Did Heidegger, his former student, who is now a big shot at the university, personally ban him from the library?
Okay, so the records are clear on this. Husserl was banned from using the University of Freiburg library in April of 1933. This was done by the university administration, applying the new state laws. It was a blanket ban on all non-Aryan faculty.
Right.
Now, there was a huge public outcry from abroad. Husserl was a global figure, and the ban was actually rescinded about a week later. But the damage was done. The insult was profound. He wrote in a letter that he felt he had been struck directly in the heart.
And where was Heidegger in all of this? What was his role?
Well, Heidegger was elected rector of the university just a few weeks later, at the end of April 1933. And on May 1st, Heidegger officially joined the Nazi Party.
Oof.
It gets worse. While there is no direct evidence that Heidegger personally signed the order banning Husserl from the library, his silence is damning. He was now the rector. He's the boss. He did nothing to stop the Nazification of the university. He didn't visit Husserl. He didn't write a letter saying, "Edmund, my old friend, I'm sorry, my hands are tied." He just ghosted him.
That's a very specific kind of cruelty, isn't it? It's the banality of evil right there in the university hallway, just looking the other way.
And then, of course, there's the matter of the book dedication.
In Being in Time.
Right. The 1927 edition had that glowing dedication to Husserl. But in the 1941 edition, published during the height of the war,
Let me guess. It's gone.
the dedication page was removed. It just wasn't there. Now, after the war, the publisher claimed this was done to avoid the book being banned entirely by the Nazi authorities. And it's true that a footnote acknowledging Husserl remained deep inside the text. But the symbolism is just stark and horrifying, the student erasing the teacher from the public record.
And so Husserl was just isolated.
Completely. He resigned from the Deutsche Academy in 1933. He just sat in his home in Freiburg, completely ostracized by the very academic community he had helped to build. We have letters from him during this time. He sounds utterly heartbroken. He talks about the complete social vacuum around him. Former colleagues and students would literally cross the street to avoid having to say hello to him.
But he didn't stop working. And this leads to one of the most incredible stories in the entire history of philosophy, the rescue of his manuscripts. Because when he died in 1938, he left behind a mountain of paper.
A literal mountain.
Yeah.
40,000 pages of unpublished notes, manuscripts, and lectures. And it wasn't just regular writing. He wrote almost everything in Gabelsberger stenography, an obsolete, very difficult form of German shorthand.
So it was basically written in code.
To the untrained eye, yes. It looks like chicken scratch. And with the Nazis in power, these manuscripts were in grave danger of being seized and destroyed. They were Jewish writings. If the Gestapo ever found them, they would have been burned. Enter Herman van Breda.
The hero of the story.
The absolute hero. Yeah. He was a young Franciscan priest from Belgium, a PhD student, just 27 years old. He came to Freiburg in 1938, hoping to study Husserl's papers for his dissertation. When he arrived, he found Husserl's widow, Malvine, living in constant fear. He immediately realized the danger the papers were in, and he decided on the spot, I have to get these out of Germany.
A Catholic priest smuggling banned philosophy papers out of Nazi Germany. That is a movie waiting to happen.
It truly is. This was late 1938, early 1939. War was imminent. Van Breda used his status as a priest and a foreigner. He got the Belgian embassy involved to create a diplomatic pouch. He packed the 40,000 pages of manuscripts, plus Husserl's entire personal library, into suitcases and trunks and smuggled them across the border to Leuven in Belgium. He even smuggled Malvine Husserl out to safety in a convent.
Oh.
He established the Husserl archives in Leuven, where they are today. If it were not for Father Van Breda, we would have lost the vast majority of Husserl's life's work. It would have gone up in smoke.
That is just incredible. And it's a very good thing they were saved. Because Husserl's final work, the stuff he was writing in those dark, isolated years, was some of his most important and influential, The Crisis of European Sciences.
Yes, published in 1936 in Belgrade, because of course he couldn't publish in Germany anymore. This is Husserl in his late 70s, looking at a Europe that is tearing itself apart at the seams. And he asks us a fundamental question. Why has science failed us?
Which is a bold question to ask. Considering science was advancing more rapidly than ever, we were splitting the atom, building airplanes, inventing radio.
But Husserl argued that science had become too abstract. It had lost its way. It had forgotten its roots. And this brings us to his final great concept, the life world. Die Lebenswelt.
Lebenswelt. Now, this is the concept that feels, to me, the most relevant to us today. What is it?
The life world is the world of immediate, pre-scientific lived experience. It is the world we actually live in before we start applying formulas and theories to it. It's the world of colors and textures and relationships and hunger and love and disappointment.
So it's kind of like the natural attitude world again.
Yes, but viewed with a newfound respect. In his early work, he wanted to bracket the life world to get to the pure essences. In his late work, he realized that objective science, physics, chemistry, geometry is actually built upon the life world. It grows out of it.
That's it.
Well, think about something as abstract as geometry. It didn't just fall from the sky in a perfect logical form. It started with ancient land surveyors in Egypt measuring actual fields of mud and grass along the Nile. It started with carpenters and builders. It started in the messy, practical life world. Then, over centuries, we abstracted it into pure, ideal formulas.
So the abstract formula always comes from the messy, lived reality.
Exactly. But Husserl said, we've forgotten that. We have started to think that the formula is the only reality and that our messy lived experience is just a kind of illusion or a source of error. He called this the surreptitious substitution. We have substituted the map for the territory.
And when you do that, science loses its meaning for actual human life.
Right. Think about modern medicine. You go to the doctor because you're in pain. That is your life world reality. It hurts when I breathe. That's real.
That's as real as it gets for me.
But the doctor looks at the MRI scan, the chart, the blood work numbers. If all the numbers on the chart say you are fine, the doctor might be tempted to say there's nothing wrong with you.
Gaslighting by science. The data says you're fine, so therefore your pain isn't real.
Exactly. Husserl saw this coming a mile away. He said we have let what he called the garment of ideas, the math, the charts, the data, completely cover up and replace the living body of experience. We trust the map more than the territory. And in the 1930s, he saw where this leads politically. If you start to see human beings as just data points, as just biological variables to be managed, it becomes very, very easy to manipulate them or to delete them if they don't fit the model.
That is absolutely chilling, because if I'm just a data set, I don't have rights. I just have variables that can be optimized.
And that is why he wrote The Crisis. He wasn't just trying to fix some obscure problem in philosophy. He was trying to save European civilization from its own cold, calculating, objectifying logic. He wanted to re-inject the human soul back into the scientific machine. He wanted to ground reason back in the Lebenswelt in shared human experience.
That is a powerful, powerful message. And it feels so relevant today with algorithms and big data basically running everything. We are constantly being told what we like, who we are, and what is true by these black box algorithms.
Extremely relevant. And that is a huge part of his massive legacy.
Let's talk about that legacy. We still got some time left. Who did Husserl influence? It seems like pretty much everyone in 20th century thought.
It is a massive and incredibly diverse family tree. I mean, first you have the existentialists, Jean-Paul Sartre. Sartre was a young man when he read Husserl, and it completely blew his mind. There's a famous story of him sitting in a cafe in Paris, and his friend Raymond Aron tells him, you see, if you are a phenomenologist, you can do philosophy about this cocktail. And Sartre apparently turned pale with excitement.
Because he realized he could analyze the experience of the cocktail as perceived.
Exactly. Sartre basically took Husserl's method, described the lived experience, and he applied it to freedom, to anxiety, to what he called the look of the other person. But he stripped out the transcendental ego. Sartre didn't believe in some pure, abstract self. He famously believed that existence precedes essence.
And then there's Simone de Beauvoir.
She took that same method and applied it to gender. She asked, what is the lived experience of being a woman in this society? Not the biology, not the theory, but the experience. And that investigation led directly to her monumental book, The Second Sex.
And what about in ethics? You mentioned Emmanuel Levinas.
Levinas was actually a student of Husserl's in Freiburg. He was deeply influenced by that whole idea of recognizing the other and intersubjectivity. But Levinas took it in a radical new direction. He said, the face of the other person makes an absolute ethical demand on us. Before we even think, before any philosophy, we are fundamentally responsible for the other. He shifted the focus of phenomenology from knowledge or epistemology to pure ethics.
And we can't forget the most unlikely one, Pope John Paul II.
Karol Wojtyla. Yes. Before he was Pope, he was a serious philosopher. He wrote his doctoral thesis and a major book called The Acting Person, where he tried to synthesize traditional Catholic Thomism with Husserlian phenomenology. He was fascinated by the subjective experience of the moral agent who is making a choice. So you have a direct line from Husserl's study in Freiburg right to the Vatican.
And finally, what about someone like Jacques Derrida, the father of deconstruction?
Derrida is a fascinating case. He literally started his career by translating and writing a long critical introduction to one of Husserl's minor works. His entire idea of deconstruction actually began as a way of Taking apart Husserl's ideas about presence and meaning and speech, you really cannot understand postmodernism without understanding the Husserl that it is constantly reacting against.
It's just amazing this guy who started out as a math nerd in Moravia ended up shaping everything from Catholic theology to French atheism to postmodernism.
And even cognitive science today, the debates we are having right now about artificial intelligence, can a computer ever truly be conscious? These are fundamentally Husserlian debates.
How so?
Well, look at something like ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
It can process syntax with incredible skill. It can manipulate symbols. It can give you a perfect, improper presentation of a house, a text description. But does it have a proper presentation? Does it have a Lebenswelt?
Yeah.
Does it feel the warmth of the coffee cup or see the redness of the sunset?
No, it's just predicting the next most probable word in a sequence.
Husserl would say, if it has no life world, it has no meaning. It's just syntax without semantics. It's the old Chinese room argument. It can simulate thinking perfectly, but it isn't thinking because there is no intentionality, no I, that is directing the arrow of consciousness toward a world.
So Husserl saves us from the robots, too.
Maybe. Or at least he gives us the vocabulary to understand why we are fundamentally different from them.
So as we wrap up here, let's try to summarize this incredible journey. We went from the rigid, objective logic of math to the fluid, first-person exploration of consciousness, from the solitary ego to the shared world, from the heights of academic fame to the absolute tragedy of the Nazi era.
It's a journey of trying to find a firm footing in a world that was falling apart. Husserl lived in a time when everything was being thrown into question. Traditional religion was fading for many, science was exploding, but also becoming dehumanizing, and politics was becoming terrifyingly radical. He wanted to find a place to stand, a point of absolute certainty. And he found it not in the stars or in old books or in God, but in the undeniable reality of the structure of consciousness itself.
To the things themselves. That was his famous motto, right?
Zusatz selbst. Don't rely on theories. Don't rely on assumptions. Just look. Look at the experiences it's given to you.
So what's the so what for our listener today? Why should someone driving to work or doing the dishes care about transcendental phenomenology?
I think the so what is about reclaiming your own experience. We live in an age of data overload. We are constantly being told what is real by algorithms, by news feeds, by scientific studies that contradict each other every other week. We are told our feelings are just chemicals in our brain. Our choices are just the result of our conditioning.
Yeah, it's very easy to feel like you are just a cog in a machine, a spectator in your own life whose experience doesn't really count unless it can be measured.
And Husserl's work is a powerful reminder that everything starts with the subjective experience. The scientific data means nothing without a consciousness there to interpret it. The algorithm doesn't exist without the human mind that built it. Phenomenology is a way of saying, my first-person experience matters. It is not an illusion. It is the foundation of all truth. It restores a fundamental dignity to your perspective on the world.
That's a very empowering thought. It's a kind of defense of humanity in an increasingly mechanical world.
Absolutely. It's giving yourself permission to trust your own eyes again.
I want to leave the listener with a provocative thought then. We talked about the Lebenswelt, the life world, the world of walking, talking, touching, smelling. Husserl warned that if our science and our culture forget the life world, they become hollow and dangerous. Today, we spend more and more of our time in digital worlds, in metaverses, on social media, in remote work environments. We are abstracting ourselves from physical reality more than at any point in human history. So the question is, in an age of algorithms and objective data, have we already completely lost touch with the Lebenswelt? And if we have, if our world is now mostly made up of improper presentations and symbols on screens, is our knowledge actually baseless? Are we building a skyscraper on a cloud?
That is the question. If we lose the ground of lived experience, do we ultimately lose the truth itself?
Something to chew on. This has been The Deep Dive on Edmund Husserl. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.